a crisp autumn morning, the town of Maplewood stirred awake beneath a pale gold sky. The streets, lined with towering maples shedding their fiery leaves, were quiet save for the occasional rustle of a gentle breeze and the distant hum of early traffic. Into this serene setting arrived Mike Larson, a man whose presence carried the weight of 1,000 silent battles. He stepped down from his old but reliable truck, the bed still carrying signs of a life marked by rugged discipline and quiet resolve. At his side trotted Ranger, a large, muscular German shepherd with eyes sharp as flint and a calm that mirrored his master's own. Mike had chosen Maplewood not by chance, but by design. After years serving as a Navy SEAL, navigating chaos and danger in distant lands, he sought a place where the echoes of war might soften beneath the steady rhythms of everyday life. This small town, with its modest population and unhurried pace, seemed to offer the kind of refuge he needed. The air here smelled of pine, wood smoke, and the faint sweetness of baked goods drifting from nearby shops, a stark contrast to the harsh realities Mike had known. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. His boots crunched softly on the gravel as he approached the Maplewood Diner, a local landmark that stood at the heart of Main Street. Painted a warm shade of cream with red trim, the diner's neon sign flickered faintly, announcing "Open" in welcoming cursive. Inside, the gentle murmur of conversation mingled with the clinking of coffee cups and the sizzle of bacon on the grill. The diner was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names and stories, where the morning rush was less a frantic scramble and more a communal gathering. The front door swung open with a familiar jingle, and Mike stepped inside. Ranger close behind, the dog's paws silent on the worn linoleum floor. The scent of fresh coffee and frying eggs wrapped around him like a comforting blanket. At the counter, locals settled into their usual spots. Farmers in flannel shirts, teachers with newspapers folded neatly beside their plates, and elderly couples sharing quiet smiles over steaming mugs. "Morning, Mike," called out Maggie, the diner's owner and cook, her voice warm and steady as she wiped down the counter. Her eyes, sharp and kind, flicked briefly to Ranger, who responded with a low, respectful sit beside Mike's boots. Mike nodded in return. His face relaxed, though his eyes remained vigilant beneath the brim of his worn baseball cap. He had learned long ago to read a room, to catch the subtle shifts in energy that hinted at trouble or peace. This morning, the atmosphere was calm, the kind of peace that felt fragile but genuine. He chose a booth by the window, settling in with a deep breath that seemed to carry away the remnants of restless nights. Ranger lay down quietly at his feet, eyes scanning the room with patient alertness. Mike allowed himself a moment to absorb the ordinary beauty of the scene, the sun filtering through amber leaves, the soft chatter of neighbors catching up, the clatter of dishes being cleared and reset. The Maplewood Diner was more than just a place to eat. It was the community's heartbeat, a crossroads where stories began and intertwined. For Mike, it was a starting point, a small sanctuary where he could begin to rebuild the life he'd left fragmented by years of service. Here, among strangers who were not so different from himself, quiet warriors of their own battles, he hoped to find something he'd been missing: belonging. Outside, the first hint of a chilly breeze stirred the fallen leaves, sending them skittering across the sidewalk. Inside, the warmth of the diner stood firm. Mike sipped his black coffee slowly, feeling the bitter heat settle in his chest. He let his gaze wander over the faces around him, some familiar, others new, and he made a silent promise to himself. This town, with its easy smiles and steady routines, would be his new mission. Not one fought with weapons or stealth, but with presence and protection. Ranger's ears twitched as the dog sensed the subtle rhythms of the room, the undercurrent of conversations and footsteps. Mike's hand brushed over the dog's thick fur, a grounding touch that reminded him of the bond they shared. A partnership forged in trust and unspoken understanding. Together, they had faced danger in far-flung places. Here, they would navigate a different kind of challenge. As plates of pancakes and eggs arrived at neighboring tables, Mike allowed his mind to settle, to enjoy the fleeting sense of normalcy. The Maplewood diner was alive with the simple joys of a town waking up, a mosaic of lives that, for now, were untouched by the chaos that had marked his past. But beneath the surface calm, Mike's instincts hummed quietly, ever watchful. The peace of this morning, he knew, was a fragile thing, one that would be tested in ways he could not yet foresee. For now, though, he was content to sit and listen, to observe the steady pulse of a community that might one day become more than just a refuge. And so, with Ranger at his side and the morning light soft on his face, Mike Larson began his first day in Maplewood, not as a soldier returning from war, but as a man seeking a new path, one step at a time. The morning calm shattered in an instant. The diner's welcoming hum was pierced by the sharp jangle of the front door thrown wide open, a sudden gust carrying cold air and tension inside. 3 figures appeared, their faces masked and eyes hard beneath dark caps. The leader, a tall man with a voice rough like gravel, barked orders that sliced through the chatter like a knife. "Everybody down. Hands where I can see 'em. This is a robbery. Don't try anything stupid." His voice was clipped, demanding immediate obedience. The patrons froze, the warmth of the morning replaced by a chill of fear. Forks clattered onto plates, coffee cups trembled in grasping hands, and hesitant murmurs died before they began. Mike's eyes narrowed as he shifted slightly in his seat, Ranger's muscles tensing beside him. The dog's ears pinned back, a low growl barely audible as he assessed the threat. The robbers moved with practiced urgency, one of them pushing a trembling young waitress aside as he stormed behind the counter, rummaging through the cash register with impatient hands. The leader paced between the booths, gun glinting in the soft light, scanning faces as if memorizing potential obstacles. "Quiet!" The leader snapped, and when a man at the counter stammered in protest, "We want the money, now!" Sarah, the waitress whose hands shook visibly, tried to steady her voice as she whispered to a frightened child clutching her mother's hand. "It's okay, honey. Just stay calm." Her eyes flicked to Mike, silently pleading for reassurance. But the Navy SEAL remained still, his expression unreadable. Mike's mind raced beneath the calm surface. Years of training flickered into focus. Threat assessment, situational awareness, the art of patience. He noted the robbers' movements, their sloppy coordination, the way the leader's impatience was already fraying the edges of control. There was no sign of backup, no sharp precision indicating professional criminals. These were desperate men, rattled and reckless. Ranger shifted his weight, muscles coiled like springs, ready to act, but waiting for the right moment. Mike's hand brushed lightly over the dog's neck, a silent signal to hold steady. Drawing attention now would risk lives. He needed to wait for an opening. The leader barked at Sarah again. "Fill the bag. No funny business or someone gets hurt." Sarah's hands trembled as she grabbed the canvas bag from a nearby hook and began stuffing it with bills from the register. Her eyes flicked anxiously toward the back door, as if hoping for a miracle or for someone to intervene. Mike's gaze followed hers, noting the emergency exit, the narrow alley beyond. The diner's layout was simple but offered a handful of potential escape routes and hiding spots. His mind built a map, cataloging every detail: the position of tables, the angle of the sun spilling through the windows, the locations of patrons and staff alike. One of the robbers, younger and visibly nervous, kept glancing toward the door, his twitchy movements betraying a growing unease. Mike's instincts told him this man might crack under pressure. Suddenly, a sharp clatter broke the tense silence as a patron's chair scraped loudly on the floor, drawing the leader's attention like a predator's gaze locking onto prey. "What the hell was that?" he growled, stepping toward the source with his gun raised. Mike's heart pounded as he realized the fragile balance was tipping. The room was a powder keg, and any spark could ignite chaos. His fingers curled into a fist under the table, steadying himself, while Ranger's growl grew deeper, a low rumble vibrating through the floor. The leader's eyes landed on Mike. "You there," he snapped, voice sharp and suspicious. "What are you staring at?" Mike met the gaze calmly, his voice steady but low. "Just watching. Don't want anyone to get hurt." The leader's eyes narrowed, a flicker of distrust flashing briefly before he turned back to the others. "Keep moving. Fill the damn bags. We're wasting time." The robbers hurried, their movements rushed, nerves fraying as the weight of the situation pressed down. Mike noticed the leader's grip tighten on his weapon, a thin sheen of sweat glistening on his brow despite the cool morning air. Sarah's hands shook more violently now, but she continued stuffing money into the bag, her face pale but determined. Mike's eyes met hers again, offering a steadying look that seemed to give her a flicker of courage. Nearby, an elderly man clutched his wife's hand, whispering reassurances, while his other hand subtly edged toward his coat pocket, where a small hearing aid lay. Mike caught the slight movement, recognizing the instinct to prepare even in fear. The tension in the diner thickened. A taut wire stretched to its breaking point. Mike's training screamed at him to act, to seize the moment before the robbers could escalate their threats into violence. But the lives around him were fragile, and any misstep could turn this morning of hopeful calm into a nightmare. He glanced at Ranger, whose eyes locked onto his with unwavering trust. Together, they waited, calculating, ready to move and when the time was right. Outside, the wind whispered through the amber leaves, carrying with it the distant sound of a school bus and the faint rumble of a delivery truck beginning its rounds. Inside, the Maplewood diner held its breath, caught in the grip of a moment that would change everything. The leader barked one last order: "Finish up! We're out of here before the cops show." As Sarah hurried to comply, Mike's gaze sharpened on the nervous robber by the door, whose fingers twitched near a concealed pocket. The tension cracked, a storm ready to break. But Mike's resolve was steel. He would protect this fragile piece, no matter the cost. Mike's eyes never wavered from the nervous robber near the door. The man's jittery movements betrayed an internal struggle, a battle between fear and determination. Ranger's body tensed beside Mike, the dog's low growl a barely audible warning that heightened the charged atmosphere. Mike knew any sudden move could trigger disaster. Yet patience was equally dangerous. He needed a plan, a way to diffuse the tension before it spiraled out of control. As the leader barked orders, pacing the length of the diner with a gun that seemed too big for his frame, Mike subtly shifted in his seat. Slowly, deliberately, he let his gaze sweep the room, memorizing the positions of hostages and obstacles alike. Every table, every chair, every patron was part of a mental map he was crafting. The diner itself was a patchwork of cover and exposure, a place where a well-timed distraction could turn the tide. Sarah, the waitress, moved cautiously between tables, her hands trembling but steady, as she gathered wallets and jewelry from the frightened customers. Her eyes flicked repeatedly toward Mike, as if searching for a sign that help was near. Mike nodded ever so slightly in response, a quiet reassurance that did not go unnoticed. Ranger's ears twitched as the dog picked up on the subtle changes in body language around him, the quickened breath of a child hiding behind a booth, the tense grip of a farmer clutching his hat, the barely contained panic in the eyes of a young couple. The dog's instincts were razor-sharp, trained over years to detect the faintest hint of danger. Mike trusted him implicitly. Mike leaned closer to Ranger, his voice a low murmur. "Stay calm, watch and wait." The command was simple, but it carried the weight of experience. Ranger's tail flicked once in acknowledgement. The leader's impatience was growing. "Hurry up, damn it! We don't have all day," he snapped, slapping the butt of his gun against the counter. The sudden noise made several hostages flinch, and Mike caught the flicker of hesitation in the leader's eyes. This was a man unaccustomed to control slipping through his fingers. Mike's mind raced. The robbers were poorly coordinated, their nerves fraying, which meant mistakes were inevitable. The nervous robber near the door kept glancing outside, his fingers brushing against the concealed weapon beneath his jacket. Mike knew that if the man panicked, he might use it, turning the situation deadly. He scanned the room for an opening. The emergency exit was a narrow door behind the counter, partially obscured by a stack of crates. If a ranger could create a distraction near there, it might pull attention away from the hostages long enough for Mike to act. Mike caught Sarah's eye again and made a subtle gesture toward the back. She understood instantly, nodding slightly as she continued her careful collection of valuables. The plan was risky, but so was doing nothing. Ranger shifted, muscles coiled, and then with a sudden burst, the dog lunged forward, knocking over a tray of coffee cups and silverware with a thunderous clatter. The noise exploded through the diner, shattering the tense silence like a bomb. "Get that dog!" the leader shouted, spinning toward the chaos with his gun raised. Panic rippled through the robbers as they scrambled to regain control. The nervous man by the door stumbled backward, startled, his hand slipping further toward his hidden weapon. Mike seized the moment. Rising smoothly from his seat, he moved with practiced precision, his body low and controlled. He edged toward the nervous robber, eyes locked on his target, every step calculated. "Easy," Mike said softly, voice steady but firm. "Nobody needs to get hurt." The man's hand twitched, and in a flash, Mike grabbed the wrist, twisting it with a controlled force born of years of combat training. The robber's weapon clattered to the floor, and Mike followed quickly, pinning the man's arm behind his back. Ranger was at his side instantly, teeth bared and ready. The leader spun around, rage flashing in his eyes. "What the hell are you doing?" he snarled, raising his gun. Mike's gaze was unflinching. "Disarming your weak link." His tone brooked no argument. The leader hesitated, and that moment was all Mike needed. With a swift movement, he closed the distance, knocking the gun from the leader's hand and twisting his arm behind him. Ranger leapt forward, placing a firm paw on the leader's chest, a clear signal of dominance. The remaining robber, caught between shock and fear, raised his hand slowly. "Don't shoot," he pleaded, voice trembling. Mike nodded to Ranger, who relaxed but remained alert. "Good boy," Mike murmured, eyes scanning the room to ensure no one else was a threat. With the robbers subdued, Mike quickly turned to Sarah. "Get everyone to the back, calmly, now." She nodded, gathering the hostages with quiet authority born of necessity. Mike and Ranger moved efficiently, securing the disarmed men with makeshift restraints fashioned from belts and shoelaces found on the floor. Outside, The distant wail of sirens began to rise, growing louder with each passing second. Mike's heart pounded as he worked, knowing help was near, but not yet here. One of the elderly patrons, a grizzled man with weathered hands, approached cautiously. "That was some quick thinking," he said, voice hoarse but grateful. Mike offered a tight smile. "Just doing what needs to be done." Ranger settled beside him, tongue lolling slightly as he caught his breath. The dog's eyes shone with quiet pride, reflecting the bond forged in moments of crisis. As the first police cruiser pulled up outside, Mike surveyed the diner one last time. The tension that had gripped the room was easing, replaced by relief and tentative smiles. The community's heartbeat had faltered, but was now steady again. Mike allowed himself a brief moment to breathe, to feel the weight of the morning's events settle. In this small-town diner, amidst strangers turned allies, he had found a new mission, not one of war, but of protection and courage in the face of unexpected danger. And as the officers entered to take control, Mike knew this was only the beginning. The din of sirens growing louder outside seemed to ripple through the walls of the Maplewood diner. But inside, a new tension took hold, one that wasn't just about the immediate danger, but about the fragile threads unraveling beneath the surface. Mike's eyes flicked to the man he had just subdued, the leader of the robbers, who now sat slumped against the counter, eyes darting nervously as if calculating his next move. Mike had seen this kind of desperation before. The man's swagger had masked a deeper turmoil. Now, stripped of his bravado, the cracks were plain to see. The leader's hands trembled slightly as he wiped sweat from his brow, and there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes that spoke of more than just fear of the police arriving. Meanwhile, the younger robber who had been so jittery now sat silently, chewing on his lip, avoiding eye contact with everyone in the room. Mike's instincts told him these men were far from professionals, too rough around the edges, too volatile. They'd been thrown together hastily, and the strain was showing. Sarah hovered nearby, still pale but steadier now, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She glanced at Mike, silently asking for reassurance as she helped calm the shaken patrons around her. Mike gave her a nod, the faintest hint of a smile touching his lips. He admired her quiet strength, fragile yet resilient, like the town itself. Mike's gaze shifted around the diner, noting the frightened faces of the hostages, their eyes wide with lingering shock. But among them, he detected something else, a flicker of hope, a spark that suggested they were already beginning to heal from the morning's ordeal. It was this resilience that kept him grounded, reminded him why he had come to Maplewood. The leader's voice broke the silence, rough and low. "You don't know what you're dealing with," he muttered, eyes locked on Mike. "This was just a job. Easy money." Mike kept his expression neutral, but inside, he was piecing together the fragments. The hurried manner of the robbery, the nervous energy, the lack of coordination. It all pointed to a deeper desperation, perhaps even a larger scheme that was only beginning to unfold. The younger robber finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "We didn't want to hurt nobody, just needed cash, fast." Mike's voice was calm but firm. "Robbing a diner isn't the way. You could have gotten hurt, or worse, and now you're in deep." The leader snorted, bitter. "You think you're the hero? This town's got its own problems. People like us, we're just trying to survive." Mike's eyes narrowed slightly. Survival's one thing. Threatening innocent people is another. As the police officers began to secure the scene, Mike took a step back, letting the law take its course. But his mind was already working ahead, connecting dots invisible to others. There was something off about this robbery. Not just the amateurs involved, but the timing, the location. It didn't feel random. He caught Ranger's eye and gave a subtle nod. The dog's tail gave a faint wag, sensing his master's unease. Outside, the town was beginning to stir in response to the commotion. Curious onlookers gathered at a respectful distance, whispers spreading like wildfire. The Maplewood Diner, usually a haven of warmth and familiarity, had become the epicenter of a sudden storm. Mike stepped outside, the cool air sharp against his skin, and took a moment to breathe deeply. The crisp morning that had promised peace was now heavy with questions. Who were these men beyond the surface desperation? Was this just a one-time act of desperation, or the first sign of something larger threatening the town? A sheriff's deputy approached, a young woman with keen eyes and a professional demeanor. "Mr. Larson?" she asked, glancing at him with a mix of gratitude and curiosity. "Thank you for your help in there. You really kept things from getting worse." Mike nodded, his gaze steady. "Just doing what I could." She hesitated, then added, "We're still piecing together what happened. Seems like this wasn't just a simple robbery. There might be more at play." Mike's jaw tightened. "That's what I suspected." The deputy's eyes flicked toward the diner. "If you're willing, we could use someone like you around here. Someone who understands how to read a situation." Mike considered the offer quietly. For the first time since arriving in Maplewood, he felt the stirrings of purpose beyond mere survival. This town had its shadows, its hidden struggles. Maybe his skills could make a difference here, not on distant battlefields, but in the heart of a community fighting for its own peace. Back inside, Sarah was helping the last of the hostages gather their belongings, her hands steady despite the tremor in her voice. Mike watched her, admiring the way she managed the fragile calm, holding the pieces together. He knew that Maplewood's story was far from over. This robbery was a crack in the surface, a glimpse of tensions simmering beneath the town's quiet exterior. And Mike Larson, with Ranger faithfully at his side, was ready to face whatever came next. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across Main Street. The Maplewood Diner, battered but unbroken, stood as a testament to resilience and hope. And as Mike prepared to step further into the life of this town, he understood that peace was not just found, it was fought for every single day. The Maplewood Police Station was a modest brick building nestled at the edge of town, its red door weathered but sturdy. Mike found himself seated across from Deputy Anna Cole, the young officer who had greeted him earlier. Between them lay a cluttered desk, strewn with reports, photographs, and a digital recorder capturing their conversation. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the room, mingling with the faint murmur of officers moving through the station's halls. Anna tapped a few keys on her laptop, pulling up surveillance footage from the diner's security cameras. The grainy black and white images flickered on the screen, revealing the robbers entering with hurried steps, their faces masked, but their body language revealing tension and uncertainty. Mike leaned forward, studying the footage closely. "See here?" Anna pointed to a figure near the back entrance. "That's the nervous one you noticed, the kid who kept glancing outside. He seems to be watching for someone or something." Mike nodded. "I caught that too. There's something off about their timing. They didn't just pick the diner at random." Anna paused the video and brought up a map of Maplewood on her screen, highlighting several locations with red pins. "We've had a spike in petty thefts along this route in the past few weeks, mostly around the industrial park and the outskirts of town. Nothing violent, just small-time stuff. But this robbery, it feels like it's connected to something bigger." Mike's eyes narrowed, his mind piecing together the fragments. Did you find any links between the suspects and those incidents? Anna shrugged. That's the problem. These guys don't have records here. At least, none that show up in our system. But local businesses have reported strangers asking questions, scouting the area. It's like someone's sizing up the town. Mike's fingers drummed lightly on the desk. Sounds like they're planning more than just quick cash grabs. Anna nodded grimly. Exactly. And with the robbers being so uncoordinated, it's likely they're pawns, used by someone else pulling the strings. Mike's gaze drifted to the window, where the sun cast sharp shadows on the quiet streets outside. Did you check if the robbers have any ties to the mountain vipers? Anna's eyes widened slightly. The name carried a heavy weight, an infamous trafficking ring that had long haunted the region's fringes. We suspected it, but nothing concrete yet. The vipers are elusive. They don't leave a lot of traces. Mike's jaw tightened. The mountain vipers were known for their brutal tactics and deep-rooted corruption. If they were involved, Maplewood might be facing a threat far beyond a simple robbery. He took a deep breath, steadying his thoughts. We need to get ahead of this. If the robbers were scouting for the vipers, then the next move could be worse. Maybe targeting businesses or people who've been asking questions. Anna's fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up recent police reports and local news articles. There's been an uptick in missing persons cases nearby, mostly young adults. Some families are too scared to come forward, fearing retaliation. Mike's eyes met Anna's, the unspoken understanding heavy between them. This was not just about money. It was about fear, control, and survival. He stood and moved toward the map, tracing the pins with a finger. We need to connect with the community. People have to know we're watching, that we won't let the vipers take hold here. Anna nodded, determination sharpening her features. We're planning a town meeting tonight. I want you there, Mike. Your experience could make a difference. Mike hesitated, the weight of his past pressing against the promise of this new role. But the fire in Anna's eyes mirrored his own resolve. He had come to Maplewood seeking peace, but peace sometimes demanded action. I'll be there, he said firmly. As the afternoon light faded, Mike returned to the diner. The place was quiet now, the early morning chaos replaced by a slow return to normalcy. Maggie was behind the counter, wiping down services with practiced efficiency, while Sarah sat at a corner booth, her hands wrapped around a warm mug. Mike approached them both, offering a nod of reassurance. How are you holding up? Sarah smiled faintly. Better, thanks to you. Maggie added. The whole town's talking about what happened. People are scared, but they're also grateful. You did good, Mike. Mike felt a surge of warmth. For the first time since arriving, he sensed a real connection, something beyond survival, beyond duty. He knelt beside Ranger, running his hand along the dog's thick fur. We've got work to do, boy. This is just the beginning. As dusk settled over Maplewood, the town's lights flickered on one by one, casting a soft glow over Main Street. The coming night promised answers, challenges, and the fragile hope of a community ready to stand together. Mike gazed out the window, the quiet determination in his chest growing stronger. Whatever shadow the mountain vipers cast, he would face it head-on, with courage, with loyalty, and with Ranger at his side. The evening air hung heavy with anticipation as twilight settled over Maplewood. Inside the small diner, the usual hum of conversation was replaced by a tense quiet. Mike leaned against the counter, his eyes scanning the room as the locals gathered, faces etched with worry, hope, and the unspoken need for reassurance. Ranger sat calmly at his feet, alert yet composed. The dog's presence a silent anchor amidst the swirling uncertainty. Sarah moved through the crowd, offering soft smiles and gentle words, trying to ease the tension. Mike caught her eye briefly, grateful for her steadying influence in a room brimming with unease. Outside, the fading light cast long shadows through the windows, painting the scene with a somber hue. Mike's mind was already working, analyzing, planning. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. The erratic robbery, the nervous glances, the mounting reports of disappearances. It was clear now that the mountain viper's shadow loomed large over the town, and the stakes had never been higher. As the last of the patrons settled into their seats, Mike stood straight and cleared his throat, drawing the room's attention. "Thank you all for coming," began, voice steady and calm. "I know these past days have been unsettling. What happened this morning wasn't just a robbery. It's part of something bigger, something that threatens all of us." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, faces tightening with concern. Mike met their eyes, conveying both understanding and resolve. "We're not powerless. Together, we can protect Maplewood. But we need to be vigilant, to look out for one another." He scanned the room, noting the subtle shifts, the nods of agreement, the clenched jaws, the determination budding behind fearful eyes. "Ranger and I will be working with Deputy Cole and the Sheriff's Department to keep watch. But your help is vital. If you see anything suspicious, strangers asking questions, unusual activity, don't hesitate to report it." An older man in a worn jacket raised his hand cautiously. "What exactly are we up against? These mountain vipers, who are they?" Mike's gaze didn't waver. "They're a criminal organization involved in trafficking and extortion, known for operating in the shadows. They've been moving closer to Maplewood, using people like the robbers this morning to test the waters. They want to control this area." A woman near the back spoke up, voice trembling. "How do we stop them? They sound dangerous." Mike nodded solemnly. "They are, but they're not invincible. They rely on fear and secrecy to operate. If we stand together, share information, and refuse to let them intimidate us, we can push back." The room was silent for a moment before a younger man, a farmer Mike had seen around town, leaned forward. "We've got families here. Kids, what if they come after us?" Mike met his gaze with steady reassurance. "That's why we need to be prepared, not just physically, but as a community. We'll work with law enforcement to increase patrols, improve communication, and provide support where needed." Sarah stepped forward then, her voice soft but firm. "We're stronger than we think. This town has faced hard times before. We'll get through this, together." The crowd's energy shifted, a fragile hope threading through the room. Mike felt a surge of determination, the kind that had carried him through countless missions. This was different. A fight not waged with weapons alone, but with trust and unity. As the meeting wrapped up, Mike found himself outside, the cool night air crisp against his skin. Ranger padded beside him, nose to the ground, alert to every sound. Mike's thoughts churned. The coming days would be critical. Suddenly, Ranger's ears perked, and he let out a low growl. Mike's hand moved instinctively to his belt, fingers brushing the grip of his concealed knife. From the shadows near the alleyway beside the diner, a figure emerged, hood pulled low, steps cautious. Mike's voice was calm but commanding. "Stop. Identify yourself." The figure hesitated, then slowly raised, hands in surrender. "I'm just passing through," a young man said, voice shaky. Mike's eyes narrowed. "This isn't a safe place for strangers right now. What are you doing here?" The man swallowed hard. I heard about the robbery. I want to help. I know things about the Vipers. Mike exchanged a glance with Ranger, weighing the risk. Talk, now. The young man lowered his hood, revealing a pale face and eyes haunted by fear. I used to run errands for them, nothing major. But I saw things. They're planning something bigger, more kidnappings. They're tightening their grip on the outskirts. Mike's heart tightened. The threat was growing, and time was running short. Who's behind this? Mike pressed. The man shook his head. A man named Sterling. He's got ties inside the police department, feeding information to the Vipers. Mike's eyes flashed with anger. Corruption within the very force meant to protect Maplewood was a danger all its own. Stay with me, Mike said firmly. We'll keep you safe, but we need to move carefully. As the night deepened, Mike and Ranger led the young man toward the sheriff's office, the weight of the revelation settling heavily between them. The battle for Maplewood was no longer just about stopping a robbery. It was about exposing the darkness lurking within and standing strong against the tide. And with every step, Mike knew one thing for certain. They wouldn't face it alone. The sheriff's office was a small, unassuming building tucked between the town's post office and the hardware store, its brick facade weathered by years of sun and storm. Inside, the fluorescent lighting buzzed faintly, casting sterile shadows across desks piled with paperwork and the soft glow of computer monitors. Mike sat at a corner table, the young man who had come forward seated beside him, eyes darting nervously around the room. Ranger lay quietly at Mike's feet, ears perked for any sign of trouble. Deputy Anna Cole entered, her expression serious but composed. We've set up a secure room for him to rest, she said softly, nodding toward a small office down the hall. He'll be safe here while we figure out the next steps. Mike nodded appreciatively. Good. We need to protect him. If Sterling finds out what he said, there's no telling what might happen. Anna's jaw tightened. I'm coordinating with state police. We'll get a team here soon to handle the investigation discreetly. Mike leaned forward, lowering his voice. We have to act fast. If the Vipers are planning more kidnappings, every moment counts. Anna pulled up a map on her tablet, zooming in on the outskirts of town where recent disappearances had occurred. These locations match reports we've been getting. Remote cabins, abandoned warehouses, places perfect for holding people without drawing attention. Mike's eyes scanned the map, mentally, marking paths and possible entry points. We need to set up surveillance, get eyes on these spots, and warn the community to be extra vigilant. Anna nodded. I'll organize patrols and inform local businesses. But we need someone on the ground who knows tactical response. Mike's gaze met hers steadily. I'm ready. Outside, the night had deepened, wrapping Maplewood in a cloak of silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves and distant barking of dogs. Mike stepped onto the porch, breathing in the cool air, feeling the weight of responsibility settle firmly on his shoulders. Ranger followed, tail low but alert, sensing the change in atmosphere. Mike's mind raced with plans and contingencies. The town's safety depended on quick, decisive action. Back inside, the young informant was resting, but his unease lingered in the room. Mike understood. Fear was a constant companion for those caught in the crosshairs of such dangerous games. Later, gathered in a small conference room with Deputy Cole, Sheriff Reynolds, and a couple of trusted officers, Mike laid out a plan. Charts, maps, and notes littered the table as they discussed strategies. We can't afford to be reactive, Mike said firmly. We have to anticipate their moves, cut off their access points, and protect potential victims before it's too late. Sheriff Reynolds, a grizzled man with years of experience etched into his face, nodded slowly. "We've been stretched thin, but with your help, Mike, we might just stand a chance." Plans were drawn for coordinated patrols, surveillance teams, and community watch programs. Mike insisted on involving trusted locals who knew the terrain intimately: hunters, hikers, anyone familiar with the outskirts. As the meeting concluded, Anna pulled Mike aside. "You should rest when you can. This won't be easy." Mike shook his head, determination burning bright. "No rest until we've made a dent." The next morning, Mike and Rangers set out before dawn, moving quietly through the dense woods bordering Maplewood. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and damp earth. Mike's eyes scanned the underbrush, muscles coiled for action. Ranger's nose twitched as he picked up faint scents. Footprints, the faint echo of human presence. Mike followed, trusting the dog's instincts to guide them through the maze of trees and hidden trails. Hours passed as they navigated the rugged terrain, eventually arriving at a dilapidated cabin tucked away in a clearing. Windows were darkened, the porch sagging with neglect. Mike's pulse quickened. He signaled Ranger to stay low as he approached the front door, hand resting lightly on the grip of his knife. The silence was thick, broken only by the distant call of a hawk. Suddenly, a rustle came from the back of the cabin. Mike pivoted, eyes sharp. A shadow moved, quick, deliberate. "Freeze," Mike commanded, voice firm. A figure stumbled, into view. A young woman, disheveled and wary, eyes wide with fear. She hesitated, then collapsed into Mike's arms, relief flooding her features. "I've been trapped here," she whispered. "They said no one would find me." Mike's grip tightened protectively. "You're safe now." He radioed for backup, his heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and hope. This was the break they needed, a sign that their efforts were making a difference. As the sun climbed higher, casting light over the hidden corners of Maplewood, Mike knew the fight was far from over. But with every step, every rescue, the town's fragile peace grew a little stronger. And with Ranger by his side, he was ready to face whatever darkness lay ahead. The tension in the air was palpable as Mike and Ranger positioned themselves strategically along the ridge overlooking the abandoned warehouse. The sun had climbed to its peak, casting harsh shadows that stretched across the cracked asphalt and rusted metal. Below, a small convoy of vehicles had just pulled up. Dark, unmarked trucks that looked out of place against the quiet backdrop of Maplewood's outskirts. Mike's gaze hardened as he watched the figures emerge from the vehicles. Rough, heavily armed men, moving with a confidence born of ruthless intent. Among them was Sterling, the corrupt officer, whose name had become synonymous with betrayal. His presence confirmed the depth of the threat they faced. Ranger remained calm but alert at Mike's side, ears twitching as he picked up faint sounds, the murmur of voices, the clink of weapons being readied. Mike's fingers tightened around the grip of his knife, his mind racing through the plan they had rehearsed. The element of surprise was their greatest advantage. Mike signaled to Deputy Cole and the sheriff's team, hidden in the tree line, ready to move at his command. The operation was delicate. Any misstep could ignite a firefight that might engulf them all. Suddenly, Mike spotted a line of hostages being led from the warehouse. Young men and women, their faces pale and eyes hollow. The sight fueled a fire within him, sharpening his focus. He raised his hand, a silent signal to begin. Rangers sprang forward, breaking from cover with a fierce bark that echoed through the clearing. Chaos erupted as the vipers scrambled, momentarily caught off guard. Mike moved swiftly, intercepting Sterling just as he reached for a weapon. Their clash was fierce but brief, Mike's training and precision overpowering the corrupt officer's desperation. Ranger lunged, pinning Sterling to the ground with a growl that brooked no resistance. Gunfire erupted, bullets whizzing past as the sheriff's team joined the fray, taking cover behind vehicles and trees. Mike's voice cut through the chaos, coordinating movements, directing the team to secure the hostages and neutralize threats. Amidst the firefight, Mike spotted a young woman struggling against a captor near the warehouse's entrance. Without hesitation, he charged, dispatching the assailant with a swift strike. The woman collapsed into his arms, trembling but unharmed. As the last of the vipers were subdued and the hostages freed, the adrenaline coursed through Mike's veins, mingling with relief and exhaustion. Ranger stayed close, vigilant until the danger had passed. The sheriff's voice came over the radio, calm but resolute. "Sterling and his crew are in custody. The hostages are safe. Good work, everyone." Mike took a moment to catch his breath, the weight of the mission settling on his shoulders. The victory was significant, but the scars of betrayal ran deep. He looked around at the faces of the freed hostages, their expressions a mix of gratitude and disbelief. This was why he had come to Maplewood: to protect, to serve, to restore hope. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting the clearing in a warm glow, Mike felt a quiet satisfaction. The battle had been won, but the war for Maplewood's soul was ongoing. With Ranger by his side and the community beginning to heal, Mike knew they would face whatever came next, together. The early evening air was thick with a mixture of relief and exhaustion as police cruisers lined the quiet streets of Maplewood. The town's heartbeat, once steady and calm, had quickened over the past days, racing toward a tense crescendo that now slowly began to ease. Mike stood near the diner's entrance, Ranger at his side, watching as officers processed the detained criminals and escorted the freed hostages to waiting ambulances and support teams. Whispers of gratitude and awe floated through the crowd, gathering on Main Street, neighbors offering embraces, shared tears, and tentative smiles. The once fractured community was knitting itself back together, stronger and more united than before. Sarah approached Mike, her eyes bright despite the day's trauma. "You did it," she said softly, placing a hand on his arm. "You saved them all." Mike gave a modest shake of his head. "We did it. Together." Deputy Anna Cole joined them, her expression a mix of fatigue and pride. "The town owes you a debt, Mike. Your experience made all the difference." Mike glanced toward the line of officers securing the perimeter, his mind still alert despite the moment of calm. It wasn't just me. The community, the sheriff's department, they all stepped up. That's the real strength. An elderly man nearby, one who had watched the events unfold from his porch, nodded solemnly. "Maplewood's always had heart. You just reminded us how to fight for it." As the crowd began to disperse, Mike allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The battle against the mountain vipers had been fierce and costly, but the victory marked a turning point. The corrupt Sterling was behind bars, his network disrupted, and the hostages free to return to lives interrupted, but not broken. Ranger nuzzled Mike's hand, grounding him in the present. The dog's steady presence was a reminder of loyalty and resilience, the qualities that had carried them through the darkest hours. Inside the diner, Maggie was already preparing a warm meal, her kitchen bustling with volunteers, eager to nourish both body and spirit. Mike followed Sarah inside, the familiar sense of coffee and fresh bread wrapping around them like a balm. The diner, once a backdrop to fear and uncertainty, was now a sanctuary of hope and renewal. Laughter began to ripple through the rooms as stories were shared, and plans for the future whispered among friends. Mike took a seat near the window, watching the last light fade from the sky. The town spirit was healing, and so was he. He thought of the long road ahead, the challenges still to come, the vigilance required to keep darkness at bay. But for now, there was peace, a moment to breathe, to belong. And with Ranger by his side, Mike knew they would face whatever came next with unwavering courage and faith in the community they had fought to protect. The Maplewood Diner had become more than a place to eat. It was a beacon of resilience, a testament to the power of unity in the face of adversity. Outside, the stars began to twinkle, silent witnesses to the quiet strength of a town reborn. Weeks had passed since the chaos that threatened to unravel Maplewood. Yet the spirit of the town pulsed stronger than ever. The streets bore the gentle hum of daily life. Children laughing as they rode their bikes, neighbors exchanging greetings, and the steady rhythm of work and rest weaving the town's fabric back together. Inside the Maplewood Diner, the heart of this close-knit community, Mike sat across from Sarah and Deputy Anna Cole, sharing a hearty breakfast. Plates piled high with pancakes, eggs, and crispy bacon sat before them. But the real nourishment came from the camaraderie and hope that filled the room. Ranger lay quietly by Mike's feet, his eyes alert but relaxed, a silent guardian amidst the warmth. The diner buzzed with energy, a far cry from the tense mornings of recent memory. Maggie moved between tables with a bright smile, serving regulars and newcomers alike. Her dream of a wildlife rescue center now well underway, thanks to community support sparked by the ordeal. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes shining. It's amazing to see how much has changed. People are coming together in ways I never expected. Mike nodded, feeling a deep sense of purpose settle within him. This town gave me a second chance. I'm glad to be part of it. Anna smiled, her voice steady. And with you here, we have someone who understands what it means to protect and serve. Not just with strength, but with heart. Outside, the morning sun spilled golden light across the streets, illuminating the vibrant colors of autumn leaves and the renewed energy of a town healing. Mike's gaze drifted to the window, watching as children played near the park, their laughter a balm to his soul. He thought back to the journey, an ex-Navy SEAL seeking refuge, a loyal dog at his side, a community tested by darkness and brought together by resilience. The bond forged between soldier, cop, waitress, and dog had transformed Maplewood, weaving a tapestry of trust and hope. Ranger's gentle nudge reminded Mike of the unspoken promise they shared: to stand watch, to protect, and to never let the shadows return. As the diner hummed with life, Mike allowed himself a rare smile. The road ahead would have its challenges, but now he was no longer a lone wanderer. He was home. Together, they had turned their sanctuary into a stronghold of justice, a beacon of courage and loyalty in a world that often demanded both. And as the sun climbed higher, casting its warm glow over Maplewood, Mike, Sarah, Anna, and Ranger stood united, ready to face whatever the future held, side by side.